So there's this pattern going around that's being used as a gauge for how easy it is to do things in different builders. The person who started this is a bricks expert, and he created this pattern as a part of his, larger framework that he has for sale. And so he chose one of his to see how easy it was to recreate in the core WordPress block editor. There was another video even more recently that sort of addressed that and created a similar layout in the editor and really spoke to more about sort of the approach that you could take with it. The beauty of this is that there's more than one way to do things, and I wanted to do more of a one-to-one comparison. There's a few things that I want to point out before we start. I wanted to address some of the criticisms and some other points so we can provide a full context for what we're going to be doing here. The block editor, at its heart, is sort of being presented as something that can be used by people with all kinds of different skill levels, and is certainly a huge leap forward from where we were in the classic editor. And I think that either gets misconstrued or, overstated as you can do anything in the block editors that you can do in a page builder, and you can do it just as easily. Now, I personally can't speak to whether or not WordPress is trying to replace page builders, but the goal is certainly to enable people to not have to rely on them as much as they have in the past. It would be more of a preference thing or a comfort level, or you're in the process of learning, or you're not sure where to start. There's a lot out there, and to sort of get thrusted into this build a website from scratch can seem a little overwhelming if you don't have the right context, just like with any builder or any website, platform. So these builders are making that sort of first step a little easier. And they all have sort of their place in this ecosystem. But the thing about WordPress is that its intention is to, out of the box within core, is to balance what gets included with core with being able to be endlessly extendable. The page builders include a ton of extra things that account for all kinds of use cases. And then they either decide to be, super streamlined and not have a ton of options, or they sort of cater to the more developer focused ones that sort of give every option out of the box. And then there's ones that sort of fall in the middle. It's not as easy to extend the builders. Sometimes there's going to be plugins or add-ons and such, but the intent is really to have it all included and super easy to do. And so the block editor, on the other hand, is more for how can we enable the most amount of sites to do what they need and want to without including functionality that a majority of people won't use. Those kinds of things then belong in a plugin. And it's also about a balance between giving enough options to make a successful and flexible website without giving too many options so that it's overwhelming and quickly becomes a mess. I've found that a lot of the builders, unless you fully understand the builder and what you're doing and the principles of web design and development, to use it successfully, these builders get really messy really quickly. Some of them are excellent tools. I watched the video of him sort of building this pattern in bricks, and it seems like a really useful tool. It reminds me a little bit of Oxygen. It's sort of maybe a new iteration of it, but it's very similar in how it presents the options. And if you're looking to sort of edit your CSS visually, and have some of the specific functionality and workflow that a specific builder provides you, then that's a great option. But having that doesn't then mean that it doesn't work in the block editor. I want to show you that it can actually be done a lot easier than you think. So without further delay, let's dive right into building this pattern within the block editor. And I'm going to refer to the design just briefly. I'm going to also actually pull the design up over on my other screen in order to sort of let you focus on how to build it. What I like to do first is just take a quick look at the layout and what maybe some considerations might need to be and how we might go ahead and lay this out. Just take a quick minute and sort of lay it out in my head of how it's going to go. We have this top area with some content, and then this middle area with some cards, and then this bottom area with a button. Great. So you can't out of the box adjust the order of things to be different from the DOM order. So how you have it on the page is pretty much how it's going to be displayed on the front end. And then what we're going to need to do is create a block style in order to allow us to set something, send something to the top, essentially. Anytime I need to create a block style, I find it to be a really good opportunity to at least take a pause and think about, is this something I need to make a special consideration for? That's what's really nice about having something that you can extend versus having everything available to you. When you have it all available to you, you kind of just throw it on the page because you can do whatever. Here, I like to stop and think just really briefly. I've actually found a lot of these patterns to be where the accent heading says about us, and then the section heading says something like, we're really great and we're going to give you exactly what you need and make sure that you read ahead to, see what we can offer you. And so it's this like longer, paragraph type thing. And so I've found that the pattern is actually the heading is at the top in like an H2, but then it's just styled to be a lot smaller. And then that sort of section heading is a paragraph to be styled a lot bigger and bold. And then you have this sort of second paragraph. So in this case, I would take a look at the design and see how it should be created. And then I can, let the client know, or, what the workflow is going to be and what the content is going to be, and sort of think through some of these things. And if it is then requested that this pattern be, we want our section heading to be our heading tag, and then our accent heading to be something, that is an accent and is just a paragraph, then that's fine. I mean, we can then go ahead and move forward and do this. But when you have these sort of anti-patterns that show up, it is at least good to think about if it's worth disrupting the sort of tab and DOM flow for the sake of a design. In this case, we're going to go ahead and assume that we've checked in with our design team or our client or ourselves, and we've decided, yes, that we want this accent heading to just be a paragraph. And so we want to set up that send to top. Okay, well, is there anywhere else in this design that we're going to have a send to top type thing? Okay, well, it looks like kind of in these boxes, we have this label that sits at the top, and then you have a heading and some text. So that label is actually going to need to be sent to the top as well. We don't know what it's going to be, and it's got a background color, and, I think this is probably going to be best to stick inside of a group or a div. And so there's two different elements on the page that both need to be sort of sent to the top of something. And so that's something that I'm calling out here. And then as well, this hover effect. The only final thing about this design that we're going to have to take into consideration is the equal height situation. This design is the same on each card, but you have to sort of consider if the heading is longer, if the description is longer, if something gets pushed onto another line, how is that going to flow? Do we have a minimum amount of space between this top item and bottom item? So it's just something to keep in mind. And so we're probably also going to have to set a little bit of, equal height on something as well. So it's just a little something to keep in mind as we're going through this. Now, really quickly, I want to sort of run through the setup that I have here. As we'll see, and we go through this and we sort of enhance our design, the super list block is going to come into play and be really, really handy for us. As for the theme, you can create it using 2024. You can create it using a custom theme. What I've done is utilize this Ollie theme. And there's just a really simple child theme in here. Now, everything that I'm going to do, you can do within under tools and theme file editor. You can add all of this. I like having it in a separate window, and I like the look and feel of my code editor. So I'm going to do it in there, but you can do everything that I'm going to do right within this theme file editor as well. And it's just like old WordPress, where any customizations would either go in a plugin or, a child theme. We're still sort of adhering to what WordPress is really meant for. There's also a plugin that enables block styles. So each individual block, it'll enable this custom CSS for you. So if we go into our editor, we have this styles editor here. Our theme has some preset styles, so you'll see it'll change up some of the base colors. Maybe we want to go with a green instead. But then we can further edit it. We can insert some of the colors. So I don't have like the design file for this block, but I inspected it a little earlier. And so I know that we have, I think it's, let me double check. I think it's 1A, 1A, 1A. Yeah. So we're going to add that as a custom color. We're going to give it a name. We're going to call it, you know, dark background. And then we're going to add one more. And you can add all these on the fly. I like having these variables because if I were to come in here and change my mind and say, you know what, instead of dark background being this color, I want it to be a different color, then everywhere I've chosen this, it'll then adjust it. So I like to have this in as many places as possible. So it's actually the same color, but it just has a little bit of opacity to it. And I'm actually going to change this over to RGB. Oh, look, 75. That's what I wanted. Perfect. So I'm going to call it dark background with some opacity to it. And then I'm just going to save those custom styles. And then I can then come in here and change some of the theme colors as well. And then we can go ahead and leave here. One other thing I wanted to mention was our theme happens to have a full width no title page template. If we wanted to add one in, we can add in a custom template as well. So let's create a new page. We're going to call it Victor Hero, because I think we have this Victor section. That's what he's calling it. I like using the slash as often as possible because it lets me use my keyboard and I can just sort of hit enter. Now, if we open up our document overview, you can also rename groups. It seemed that was helpful for some people. Let's utilize that. So what we want to do is we have this sort of, we're not setting any specific width, or we're going to do a wide width, or we're going to do a full width. Now, full width is going to be the width of, you know, that the template allows you to do. So that's the one last thing inside the style editor that you can edit. If you go into layout, one of the things you can do is set your content width, which is like the text. It's basically just like your smaller text width, you know, how you have like your, you know, your hero. And then if you have like a paragraph, you don't want it to be, you know, 1300 pixels wide. So I think for this one, so we're going to set 620, and then we're also going to set, I think 1350 is the way to go here. One thing that you can do is override this. So if we take a look, it's 740 and 1260 right now. So right now we're setting this section to be full width, right? And then let's go ahead and add another one inside of here. And this is going to be the container that holds our content. And so we have like, you know, a heading, and we called it section heading. We want to align our text to the center, and then we have, you know, our accent heading. And as I said, the order of this can really be down to, you know, whatever your requirements are. If we're sending one of them to the top, it really doesn't matter what its place is. It's just whatever makes the most sense to your, you know, site. I'm actually going to copy over the lorem ipsum. I'm not going to type all that out. So we paste that in there, and we're going to center that text as well. And so our group here, we've chosen, you know, this max width here. If we wanted to, we can then override it to say, you know what, I want it to be 620 instead. And if we publish our page, it'll be that width. And then what we also can do is set what we think our widths should be sort of site-wide. And then if we save those, we can refresh our page, and then anything that was set previously is going to stay. So if I had chosen, you know, wide width before, it was 12 something, now it's 1350. That's going to stay wide width. Whatever you set that to be globally, that's what it's going to pick up. Or we can set it specifically and it's going to stay to what it is. So what I want to do is get rid of this. Our main overall section is going to have our background color that doesn't have any opacity. And then our text color is going to be our white. If you'll notice here, just really quick, we have this box shadow. That's actually added by our theme. It allows you to add a box shadow to a group. This is actually going to be where our other styles are going to show up. Speaking of which, we seem to have entered our first sort of, you know, potential roadblock, right? So one thing we might want to do is maybe set some padding for this, right? Let's try to get it close to our design here. Let's give it some top, left, right. And then you can update it. You can change, the font sizes. So I think that the accent heading will make it small. Let's make it extra small. I think that's, yeah, let's do that. And then we'll leave the paragraph how it is and the section how it is. And so we've sort of reached our first potential roadblock, right? So this is going to really be the only thing that you're going to have to learn special in order to do pretty much most things that you need to do in terms of layouts, which is create a custom block style. It's somewhat straightforward. So what I want to do is add a little comment and say, custom block styles. Just in case there's more stuff in this functions file, it keeps it a little bit more organized. So we're going to create a function here to hold our block styles in here, and we're going to prefix it with, so I'm overnight website. So I'm going to I prefix everything with OW underscore, just so that it doesn't conflict with anything. And then we're going to just call it, OW underscore register block styles. Inside of that function will go our block style definitions. And then the action, in order to make this happen, we would say add underscore action. And then we would do it at init, and then we would just call our function. So OW register block styles. And that's all you need in terms of making sure that these get added as block styles. And so we want to set up our send to top item, right? And we're going to do that on a couple of different block types. The cool thing about this is basically all we're doing is saying add a button to easily add a class, right? So in our stuff here, I can easily write the CSS, go under advanced, and then add an additional class, right? That's pretty easy to do. It's kind of straightforward in terms of development wise. You just take your child theme, add some styles, and then add your additional classes. But what I want to do is make it a little more streamlined, a little more reusable, a little more maintainable, no risk of misspelling classes and so on, right? So that's why I'm creating these block styles. This is a thing that you can entirely bypass and just manually enter those classes if you wanted to. So what we're going to do is we're going to call our register block styles, or style rather, sorry. And so this is going to be the first item here in our little function. Let's make sure we add our semicolon at the end there. Is we're going to call it core slash, let's do our group first. And then what you'll do is you'll add in your array for our definitions, right? So we give it a name, which is kind of like its ID. I tend to name it the same thing as the class is going to be. And then you give it a label, which is going to be what shows up on that button. And then we can make it translatable. So send to top is what I'm going to call it. And then we give it our style handle. Now this function has a few different ways that you can go about doing this. You can also add inline styles. Part of the maintainability to me is being able to sort of have these separate styles that can be applied wherever on any kind of site, on any kind of screen, that you don't necessarily need it tied to this block style. It's all different approaches, right? So you can do inline style here and instead of a style handle. I just prefer to have it be defined in a separate style sheet. And that's it. What I want to do is also do that for our paragraph, right? Because we have a paragraph, we have a group. Technically, you can come in here and wrap this paragraph in a group, and then you don't need to have the two separate styles. But again, we're trying to make it as, least DOM heavy as possible in any way that we possibly can, right? So those are our definitions. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. And then we should come over here. We have our send to top, and we're going to immediately send that to top. Now that doesn't do anything because we didn't add any styles. So we're going to go into our style sheet. And then all you have to do is, so really quick, what I want to do is add a little comment here. And I want to say, let's see, send an item to the top of a flex or grid container. Because if it's just a regular old group, it's not going to do anything. That's something to mention about these groups. So you have these three options here. This is called a block variation. And so basically you have this generic group, which is just a div, right? And then you have your row and your stack, which is our flex, which is either going to be put it in a row or a column. And so in order for something to get sent to the top, we have to turn it into a stack and we have to center it this way. And then we actually want to apply that on our inner group. So this one we can call, if we wanted to rename it, you know, hero content. And then this way we know that we're going to turn that into a stack. We're going to center it. And if you make it into a row, it turns into a row. And then this way it just allows you to then manipulate things in that same way. So if we go ahead and update that. And then what we want to do is add our styles, right? So we're just going to, there's a little bit of a syntax to learn here. So anything that you add here where it says style handle, it's going to prefix it with is dash style dash, and then what you have here. So we're going to comment to send an element to the top. And then, so it's is style. And if you're not sure, you can go to the element, set it up, and then it's going to add it to that style sheet. So it's is style w top. Gives it to you, which is really helpful. And then all we're going to do is call it order -1. Our thing is automatically now going to reflect those styles, right? So if I remove this and call it default, if I were to take this and move it down and then send it to the top, it's still going to send it to the top because that's what our styles tell it to do. If we take this and change it back to a regular group, you can see it goes back to the regular order because it doesn't have that flex stuff on it. So I'm going to add a group. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add another group. You don't technically need a group under this one because basically all it's going to do is hold our buttons. But it doesn't either way, right? Because this is going to have a div of its own, right? So let's go ahead and make it even. Let's minimize as many groups as possible, right? So we're going to send things to the center. We're going to call it call to action. And then this is where we're going to set our color. So our background color is going to be light, and then our text color is going to be dark. Our group here in the center, so if we wanted to create spacing, there's a few ways you can do it. You can set this block spacing in between our elements, and that looks like it's doing things just fine. You can also add margin and padding to these different things. I like to try to do it in the least fiddly way as possible. So if I needed to change the spacing between these things, I just had to go to one place. I don't have to go to multiple. So let's see. That's some spacing between there. And then we have our, now here's our grid, right? So, okay, so our grid wrapper is going to be a row. We're going to center it. And then we are going to add a group inside of it. Because it looks like, so if we call it grid, let's call it neon wrapper. We're going to do things in a neon way here. And I like call it neon wrapper. And then we're going to add in one of our cards, right? So this is just going to be a regular old group for now. And then if we want, we can even call this card too, right? Right. So you can set a width on here to like 300, right? I want my card to be 300. If we bring up our design again, we have different components, right? So the cool thing about the cover block is even though it looks like a background image, it is actually an image that is sort of doing some of the styles that it needs to stretch about, but still be an image on the page. So it's a lot more performant. So we can just utilize the cover block right out of the gate. And so we're going to search for cover. And let's go ahead and upload in our downloads. And let's start with our neon oil spill, right? You can add the overlay color. And the thing that I like about this is it makes it so that you don't have to set the overlay color somewhere in the CSS, right? So if one image is a little bit darker or one image is a little bit is a little bit more busy and so needs a less transparent overlay, like there's things that you can do to take into account here so it's a little more dynamic without having to hard code things. So all we're going to do here, go ahead and make this like 70, right? We have a paragraph in here. So let's go ahead and add in sort of an inner group, right? We're going to sort of contain all of the things that we have because the layout that we have is going to need a little bit of a flex situation as well. So we're going to turn that into a stack. And we're going to, well, no, let's leave things over to the left. And then on here, we're going to add our heading, right? So, and then if we hit enter, that'll give us our paragraph. And then let's go ahead and, so this, I want to make this a section 2. I'm going to assume that this is just a section on a page. This is not the page title. So this is going to then be an H3. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. Let's see. Let's make it medium. Short description. And I think the text we can leave. Let's make it small. So it's a little bit smaller. And then we have our group for our label. Let's add in a paragraph. And that one I want to make small as well, because I think it's the same size. Yeah. I'm also going to, here's a neat little trick that you can do, right? So I have these two things that I've decided, you know what, I kind of want them to be grouped. You can highlight them and group it, and now it's grouped. So you can label these if you want, where you can call this, content and label. Whatever's going to help you stay the most organized, right? We can call this card inner, right? All right. So again, we have our, let's go ahead and send this up to the top, right? So everything is laid out in the right order. So one thing I'm going to do is thinking about how this is going to work. I have this sort of card element, right? So we don't necessarily need to create a custom block style for it. It doesn't need to be something separate that has its own class unless you're going to do something to it. And that's when you can add. And so in our case, we have this sort of hover effect that's going to happen, that we're going to want to target things inside of this card element. So I do want to take this card and apply a custom block style to that as well. So I'm going to come over here, and it happens to be a group as well. I'm going to say, set up the main card element. And then we're going to call it, let's call it OW card. And this will just say card. And then if we go ahead and update this and refresh our page. So it looks like I'm here in my cover. I want to go up to my group and I want to select card. And again, for now, that's not necessarily doing anything, but that is going to help us in a minute. If we go up to our sort of our row here, we can have things stretch to fill, which is really helpful. And then, so that means that our card is going to stretch to fill, but anything inside isn't going to be 100% height. So because our cover, we can set a minimum height. We're going to set that to be 100% so that it fills the whole area. And then, so if we duplicate this a bunch of times, and then we go ahead and, you know, make one of these a lot longer, we can see that it stretches. So that gets us a little bit closer to where we want to be. Okay, let's get rid of these extra ones. So we have our card inner, and we are setting it to be 100% minimum height. I think I'm just going to do 2 for now. We come here and see where we're at. Okay. So one thing I've noticed is that I've set everything to be 100% height, but it seems like there's this sort of inner container that is not sort of inheriting that 100% height. So the only thing that we have to do to adjust that is create our own little style to account for that. So this one is going to go on the cover block, right? So let's go ahead and say set the height to 100%. And we're going to take this and we're going to call it core cover, and then say OW, let's call it height full. So we've created another block style, and then we're actually going to give this just height of 100%. So we refresh our page, give our cover a height of 100%. Take a look at where we're at. Then we're going to align items initial, and that'll sort of reset any alignment, center, or anything like that. Because we have this on the cover block, we have this thing that lets you sort of set where to put it. And so we basically have to sort of override that and reset it. And so we no longer need this, you know, minimum height of cover because we're setting the height. So that's up to you how you want to handle the, you know, minimum height, whether you want to add it here or, you know, somewhere else. And then same here, right? We have this minimum height that we're doing again on here. So let's go ahead and remove that. Anything that we're repeating, we can now make this class, right? So as well as this cover block, I'm actually going to do it for a group block as well and change nothing except for group. Now, if I do a hard refresh on this page and I come over here and I select my card inner to height 100, that allows me to set that same style that I can then, you know, override if I need to. I can do whatever I need to from here, but that just sort of lets me streamline some of these things. And then so for the vertical alignment, now if I do space between, it's going to set it to be space between. Just to remind you, here's what we're going for. So some of the things that I noticed in terms of styling this sort of like card itself, let's go ahead and take our label and we'll set it to be, you know, a background color of our sort of opaque one so that sets it up that way. And I think it's got a little bit of a border radius on it. So we're going to put in a 5 pixel border radius. And while we're here, let's go ahead and set a border radius on our card too. Might as well, right? Can set it on the cover block if we wanted to. You can see that it's, you know, adjusting. So if we go back to our card, that's not really making a difference because this is where the image is. So we've got our, you can see it's making a difference. So we've got our, you know, 5 pixel, let's make it 7 pixel radius. And then our, label here has a little bit of padding. So if we do small, it does look a little bit big. So then what I want to do is let's make it like 7 at the top and 12. Let's make it 6 and 12. Perfect. And so we can go ahead and update that. I'm going to go ahead and again delete this one. Let's get this out of our way. Now that we know everything's aligning correctly. It looks like this is a little bit of a big space. So if we go ahead and come over here and we have our dimensions, but here. If we do our block spacing again, you can see that it's now adjusting the block space. I can go into the paragraph and make the margin top be 0 and make the margin bottom be 0, but block spacing here is just a little bit easier. So I think I want to even make it smaller than small. So let's do, great, let's do 10. I think I want to make, let's see where we're at. I guess that's fine. It's hard because this is like zoomed out a little bit. It's hard to know like what the actual font sizes and stuff are. It's probably maybe a little big. So we can make this extra small and we can make this base. Now let's do it in between there and we'll do it 1.4. All right, I think that's pretty good. Add the link, right? So we're going to add a link. And then at the bottom of the style sheet, you can then say, card styles. So if we go from here, we have our, is style OW card, right? That's going to sort of be our base for all of these style definitions that we do from here. We're going to do anything that's in there that's a link, anything in there that's a link that we hover, anything in there that's a link that we focus. We don't want to underline. And this isn't something that you do lightly, right? We're going to apply a separate hover style. This isn't, this is why we're applying it only to this card element and not, some kind of other thing that could accidentally get duplicated. So we're going to text decoration none this, right? And then there's that little sort of trick that you're doing to be able to stretch this, link around the whole element. So what that does is, what I've decided to do is target the title specifically, right? I don't want to take just any link that's inside of here. I want to take something that is a title with a link. That's a conscious decision that I've made. Because again, what if you want to link this? What if you want to link other things? I'm going to argue that it's probably not ideal to link this while you're stretching the whole link around everything. But right, so we take the link, we take the class that gets added to a post title, and then we take that CSS that gets added. So this is a post title that has a link. And then so after that element, we add the empty content, we add the display, we add the position, and then the top, right, bottom, and left. And so that stretches the link the whole way. So one thing to mention is when you're extending this to be like a query loop, this currently is going to have WP block heading. So we can go ahead and add that as well as an additional target. So that if we're using either the post title or just a regular old heading, I'm okay with that. So you can see the whole thing sort of links. We're good to go on that. Then we have to change the background on hover. And so it may seem a little like, how do I get this class? How do I know where that is? You can inspect this element and just see that our overlay, when we have a cover block, our overlay has this additional span element that we're going to be targeting, right? So you can take it from here, and you want it to be as least specific as possible. while still having the effect, right? So we don't want to include the, has background dim 70 in case one of the other images has an 80 or a 60 or whatever. So we're sort of taking the least specific thing that we can and targeting this span that gets added for us. And we are going to basically just apply our transition to this. We're going to do opacity. We're going to do 400 milliseconds, and then we're going to ease into it. So what we need to do is change the background opacity to be the full number 1 unless we're hovering or focusing on it. And what I've decided to do is, because we have this such a handy tool that lets us dynamically set this sort of opacity of this, I want to make it so that I am changing it when it's not being hovered or focused, so that I'm not setting the opacity as the same and hard-coded. So the style definition for that is basically, you sort of take what you have here, which is the is style OW card, sort of main thing that we're using. And then you have the WP block cover background has background dim. And then what you do is on the is style OW card, not, and then hover, that's when you can apply your opacity 1. And now we have our hover effect on here. And then so if we go ahead and take a look at our design real quick, looks pretty good. It looks like maybe they're a little more square, so maybe they're not as tall. The thing is, what I want to do is account for, so if we go ahead and duplicate this, and again, I'm going to account for the space, right? So we have this really long title and it goes all the way up to that label. That's okay. It has the right amount of space, but I think for the purpose of sort of preserving a little bit of this space that we have that makes it feel a little bit better, what I want to do is on the, let's say on the label, we add a little bit of a margin bottom. So I'm going to go over here and select my margin bottom, and we can just go ahead and give it a small. That's fine. And I'll do the same for this duplicated one. And you'll see that that just adds a tiny bit of extra space so that we're not pushing right up against it. And you can make that space as big or as small as you want. So the way they're looking, they're a little bit tall, right, compared to here. So maybe what we want to do is, our cover is set to height 100, but we want to set a minimum height. And so instead of it being, too tall, we want it to be maybe, 350 instead. Make it a little more boxy. So that's on our cover. We have a minimum height and then a height to 100. So if we make the title a little bit longer, it's still going to stretch, but the smallest size is going to be a little bit more square. So aside from that, everything looks really good. So short description goes here. So it looks like maybe the block spacing is good. So maybe the font sizes are a little bit more, small. So maybe instead of 300, we make it 330. And so we can go ahead and delete this one. And then we duplicate that one. And you can see they're a little smushy, right? So what I want to do is go back up to our wrapper, and we want to allow them to wrap to multiple lines. And that's going to sort of fix the spacing issue, and it's going to make it be that minimum width. It's not going to get too smushy, and we're not going to have to account for all the different screen sizes. But one thing is, you then have to adjust the spacing on the inside. So this is set to full width, and then the inner blocks are going to use the content width. So what we want to do is set that to like our 1350, right? And then here we can set our width to be 650. So our wide is like 1350 and our content is 650. So then now that we've set those explicitly, that then makes the values available to us on here. So we want to make our neon wrapper wide, and our hero content is then going to stay that, you know, sort of smaller size. That will now let us have a much wider area. It looks like maybe the padding should be a little less. So if we go over here and adjust the cover padding to be small. How does that look? Maybe a little too small. So let's adjust it again on our cover block. Make it a little bigger. Yeah, that looks good. And then I think maybe we can make it, let's see, what's the width that we should make this? Looks like maybe we can make it 320. Okay, so it looks like 300 will work. So let's make it 300. Make our content 300. And then we'll go ahead and duplicate this. See where we're at. And they all fit on a line. And then this way, when we go smaller, it's just going to sort of wrap really nicely. So we have this sort of hover effect. The demo that he did also have a scaling effect. I think that sort of pushes it over the edge into needing to respect the reduced motion, because you're having a fade, then you're having a scale. Anytime there's a scale is usually an indicator for me to kind of respect that. So we're going to say card styles, change scale on hover, and then we're going to do our media query of prefers reduced motion. And if they have no preference set, then we can go ahead and do our is style OW card image to transition the scale. And then we can have that image on the card hover and on the card focus within. So then maybe on this we do on focus, focus within. And then that is when we scale to 1.1. So if we refresh our page, we've got the scale going on because I don't have reduced motion turned on. But then we still have that focus. Now I'm going to do this in a browser that I'm not logged into, just so we can fully get a feel of how the tab works. So you can see that it sort of has a focus. It has that that heading focus, which is fine, because that's the link that we're focusing on. But if we wanted to adjust it for, you know, to be that one-to-one example that we were given, then we can go ahead and say card styles adjust focus. We would say is style OW card focus within. And then he's got, I have over here the value that he gave it. Just so that we're exactly the same. Again, if I had design files or, you know, extra time, I could play around and such. But this is essentially taken from his, you know, demo so that we can stay true. And again, these are all things that were done with custom CSS. So this isn't anything that the builder did. This isn't anything that, you know, I mean, some of this stuff you could probably do with a, like an animation plugin where like on hover, you do all these animations. But this works just as fine. And then, so then we're going to do on our dim again. So let's go grab our dim, and on the card focus within, here's where we have to set a value. Unfortunately, we can't sort of grab the dynamic value. But because this is sort of a focus thing, it's okay that it's a little different. So instead of being on the hover, we do on the focus tip. Opacity, let's do 0.8 just to be safe. If we go over here and we refresh the page and we tab on down, now we're getting our focus. And then our hover is doing just the same. So that's it, right? We're done, basically. I know it was kind of long. I didn't go quite as fast because I wanted to make sure this was a clear look at what the block editor was capable of doing. I didn't want to do this for the purpose of speeding through to prove that it could be done in 20 minutes. If this were my site that I were developing for, a client, I would have some of these utility classes, just like he has his utility classes, and it took him 17 minutes to do it in Bricks Builder. And if I wasn't sitting here describing all the things I was doing, it probably would have taken a lot shorter as well. I did want to go over some of these concepts so that this is useful and transferable as a skill, right? So a lot of the stuff that I've done here is basically just how you're going to be doing the things to create these sort of more advanced blocks, right? So I think if we were to take a look at this, and we ultimately did want to go with the grid, right? So that's one of the things that's like, the flex is fine, but the client's really, needing that grid and they want it to flow that way. Okay, so that's fine. If we think about how, a grid at this point, it works. It's created that layout. It works on all the device screen sizes. We're talking about a very specific use case with something that we are already writing custom CSS for. So in this case, we're just going to create a new block style for this. So if we have our, let's see, we want to put it on our overall group that is currently set to display flex. So if we take this and we say, display grid instead, and then we call it for, and then he set his min-max to 0 and 1 FR. So we can go ahead and do the same thing there. That sets it up, right? We're done. So let's go ahead and add that, right? We might as well. We did it. So we're going to say, use. And this is something that you can apply to like a general sort of starter theme or starter child theme. So we're going to call it just OW grid, right? And we're going to say use grid. And then in our styles, we just take those 2 lines of code that we did. So we just take these 2 styles that we've created and we do. So instead of it being under cards, we're going to put it under our custom block styles, and we're going to say, right? And so now we're back to our flex. And then if we come in here, do a refresh, and we have our, let's do our neon wrapper as use grid. We haven't done any kind of responsive to this yet. So we just need a little bit of specificity there. We have to do the div is style OW grid. And then we would have to switch it out to the different responsive sizes that we want, right? I think instead of doing, let's see, where do we got? Instead of doing the min-max 0, we could just do an autofill, right? So if we have, it's going to autofill these sort of things. And then because I have that, so then what you would do is get rid of the set, right? So I like when things are responsive and I don't have to mess with stuff. So I would much rather do a size of the div. And so here what we would do is on these cards, we would get rid of the width that we have on each of these so that it fills whatever the, container size is. And we refresh it. And now it's going to fill based on the block gap instead. So the point here is that there's a ton of options. I really like Flex because I can center it without having to do last child stuff or any kind of custom media queries. It just accounts for all. You can put 4 items, you could put 3 items, you could put 7 items. It really is just going to sort of flow out for you. But that is an example of how to do the grid really easily. Create a custom style, add display grid with your grid template columns of whatever you want it to be. You could do media queries if you want. That's how this one skill of writing a custom block style and adding some CSS either inline or in a separate style sheet is basically sort of the key that you're going to need to unlock whatever layout you need to do. Again, we're here, we're done, we're ready, it works. I think the one other thing I wanted to point out is it can be handy to have that list instead of using these divs, right? So if you use the screen reader, it's going to sort of read everything. It's not going to tell you how many items there are. It's pain, right? So that's where the what is it called? Super list comes in. So if we go at the edge of this paragraph, and then we say super list, we are going to put this over here. So this is how you would go about doing it semantically, right? So the cool thing about this is it basically just takes a list, and I can just take this card and literally drag it right into here. And it's going to do everything that I need it to do. Right, so I'm going to actually just remove this one, and I'm going to duplicate this, and this. So the only thing that I've reached out to the plugin author about. So you have this change list style here. No marker would obviously be ideal for the situation. What happens is she's decided to turn that into a div, or it's happened that way. I'm not really sure, so instead of it being a list element, it turns it into a div with some list items in it, which isn't correct. And so until that's fixed, you could just sort of add in, a style to sort of account for that. So you would basically create this and then inspect it. And then so what happens is it is temp fix, right? And we would call this and we would just say list style none, so that it still gets read as a list, but doesn't have these markers. And then so there's a couple of different, so this orientation, we can set it to be the grid. I think what I want to do is actually move this even below. I might even want to create another group around it. And then send it on its own. So we still have it here, but it's got a clear separation. All right, so we've set the orientation, we've set that, and if we refresh our page, oh yeah, we have to set our width, right? So we want it to be wide width, and we refresh the page, and here we are. And this one does the same thing as my grid does, but this way semantically it just sets it up as a list instead. And so it's just like a really nice way to enable that list functionality using a plugin that it would be nice if eventually that this plugin got so popular that it became this I can't believe this isn't in core type thing. And then it gets adopted, right? So that to be able to put block items inside of a list should be a thing that you should be able to do, right? And so I would agree there that that's a limitation. But fortunately, we have, like I said, this big ecosystem that helps us out. And she's created this magnificent plugin that enables us to put blocks inside of list items. I think that sort of covers everything. we've got a couple different ways. What I can do is, if you want to sort of stop here and you're satisfied, then that's good. And I can sort of go into that like mini part 2 that he had in that video too, to loop through. Why don't we do that real quick now too? Activate advanced custom fields, because it's a quick way to create custom post types. I like to create them via its own plugin so that it's not tied to advanced custom fields if possible, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly fine and fast and easy. So we're going to add a post type, and let's call them neon stuff. Let's call it neon products and neon product or service or whatever. I don't know. And then what I want to do is enable the excerpt as well, because if we look at this layout, right, we have like a category type thing. We have a title with a link, and then we have like a short excerpt that can be added as an advanced custom field type that is called description. But why reinvent the wheel? We already have an excerpt field that we can add text into, so we might as well use it. If you are going to do a query loop with using fields to display data, that's when you're probably going to be better off creating an advanced custom fields block. So in this case, I'm really just going to stick to the core. We're going to do one more thing and call it a day. So we have this excerpt that I want to add in there and save the changes. So now we have our neon stuff, right? So we're going to add one, and we're going to call it oil slick. And I mean, you can enter, content about it. And then what you're going to do is toggle over to the main post type screen. And then you have this little excerpt drop down, right? So we would say, let's see, mesmerizing colors of oil and water. Cool. And then we can also add a featured image, right? I think that's the one. Yeah. Okay. So we've set the featured image. We've got a title. We've got that. And then you know what I think we want to do is create some categories, right? So it doesn't look like we've enabled that. So let's go ahead and go back to our post type and our taxonomy, and we want to add neon categories. And we want to add it to our neon product post type. Perfect. So if we refresh this, now we can add it and call it oil slick, right? And update it. Let's add another product. If you're going to add a bunch of products at once or a bunch of posts, there's a plugin called Quick Post that I would encourage. So let's do jellyfish. You wouldn't think it's neon, right? So let's add in a featured image of jellyfish. And our category is going to be animals. Our excerpt is going to say scary, intriguing, hypnotizing creatures flopping about. Do they flop? I don't know if they would be considered flopping. Maybe they're gliding. I don't know. So we can publish that one. We can add in another one. We'll call it color usage. Our image for this one is going to be a thumbs up. And we're going to say photography. And you can see, as I start to type, it does display the other categories that are available to me. And so here I would say using different colored lights to make photos moody. If you don't add an excerpt, I believe it would then pull from the content on the page, but because we're trying to be really specific about the text that goes there, you might as well write an excerpt. So that's what we're going to do here. And then we're going to add a final one and call it Bubble Slick. And let's set the featured image of this one. Give it a caption. Is it oil? Is it bubbles? Does it matter? Okay, I think we're good now. So let's go let's go back to our making myself giggle. Let's go back to our pages, to our Victor hero. And should we duplicate it? Let's go ahead and duplicate it. So this would be, let's rename this so we know where we are. Section, we'll call it query. All right. Let's go over here. And so what we're going to do is first just add a query block, query loop, right? We're going to stick that in our section. And we're going to start blank because we don't really need anything. So we're going to get rid of the pagination. We could leave no results. It'd be like, you know, something like that coming soon, right? So under the post template, that's where our card's going to go. So what I'm going to do is stick the card inside the post template. We're going to delete this other stuff. And we've got our card, right? So now we just have to make it dynamic. When you go to the cover block, you can now replace the image with use featured image. Let's go ahead and go up to our query loop. We have this little display settings thing here, items per page. We're going to do 4. Our width, again, is going to be wide. And then our post type is going to be neon product. And now they're filling in, right? Now we have all of our items. Let's go into our content. Now, this is where, when I was talking about the styles, we're targeting either a block heading or a post title, because now we're going to change this and we're going to call it the post title. And then so on our title, we make the title a link. We set the size to, I think we had said, let's keep it 1.3, that works. And that's all we did to that. And then instead of a paragraph, our paragraph is sort of our home base, right? So I can just delete that text and do the slash. And then we're going to say excerpt. So you can set the max number of words if you wanted to. So you can see it's pulling all those in. If we do the bubble slick one and we get rid of like the excerpt on this, you can see that it pulls in the content and it's going to limit it to the number of words that you have there. So let's stick that back. And so it's looking pretty good, right? So now we just need it to go in a grid. So we have our post template and grid view. We toggle that. It's either list view or grid view. And our columns, we want it to be 4. And then we're going to get rid of our super list. I've pre-written it here. So basically at the, max width of 1024, you're going to set your core post template layout to go down into less of a grid. If we inspect the code here, you'll see that it is still in a list. And that's what I was talking about with the super list, where just because you set it to like a grid view or a no marker, it should still utilize the list markup. So we don't have to use that super list plugin anymore because we are using a query. And then this last thing that we want to make dynamic is the category. So we would say categories, and then we would transform it to the variation of neon categories. Then we adjust the font size to be extra small, and you can see that we didn't add a category to this one. So we want to make sure that when we have a design like this, that we are adding categories. Now, one thing you can do is instead of setting the background on here, so we're going to clear out that background and we give it here instead. And then we set the padding here. I think I had it, it was what, 6 and then 12? And so that will then make it so that that little thing disappears, but it kind of looks missing, right? So you do want to make sure that you're adding things, but accounting for that if it doesn't exist kind of situation. So to give a quick recap of what we went through, in order to create this layout here, we've taken a quick look at it to identify some of the places where we're going to have to take some time to create a custom block style. We've identified some of the areas that we're going to have some custom CSS that's outside of the block editor, and we've sort of identified maybe some of the elements that we're going to use to build this. And then we dove right in and started building using all of the different options available to us throughout the block editor. We did set up some defaults over in our style book and edited some of the colors and some of the spacing and some of that. Not required, but we wanted to make it as seamless as possible. So then we created our content area and added in some block styles. So we started with our send it to the top item, and then we created our sort of general box utilizing some of the different elements available to us, like changing out the HTML into a section, setting things up to be a row, using the cover block, setting it up to be a stack, some of the alignment situations that we've got going on and the justification. And we placed everything we needed to. We sent this up to the top again. We adjusted the font size and we did everything we needed to. We adjusted some of the padding. We set the background and we created our overall card block style. We also did a full height block style so that we can get the stretching to behave in a way that we like. And we also did a secondary use grid option, just in case that was something we wanted to use instead. We also wrote styles to go with each one of those block styles. We have send it to the top. We have our full height. We have use grid instead of flex. And then we have all of these card styles that would theoretically either be written, on the fly like we did, or copied and pasted from a previous project or from somewhere else, and or used utility classes and things like that. And so we took care of our hover and our focus. That's it. That's what we took care of. And then we added our little button at the bottom. So hopefully you got some kind of value out of this. Hopefully you were able to see the potential of the block editor, and that ultimately there really isn't much extra you need to do in order to make it a lot more flexible and fun to use. Get yourself a good theme, or create your own base starter theme, and then play around with some block styles, recreate some layouts using those block styles, but also trying to use them sparingly. Only use them when you have to. Instead, it's going to be really important to explore all the different options available to you. It's going to be important to play around with different groupings of different blocks. And so hopefully this gave you a little bit of familiarity for what I consider to be one of the more valuable pieces of the puzzle to really start to make this picture really come together. There's a ton of other stuff that you can do when it comes to creating advanced layouts. You can create patterns that you stick inside of a theme. You can create all kinds of stuff. There's a ton of stuff you can do. But when it comes to recreating something that you saw that you thought was really cool and that you want to do really advanced, hopefully this will then give you the guideline on how to do that. And you should be able to take it from here.